Back here on CBS Sports HQ, presented by Jeep with the 27th overall selection in the NBA draft. The Minnesota Timberwolves taking Terrence Shannon Jr., third in Division I in points per game last season with 23 points. Earlier this month, he was found not guilty of rape and sexual battery charges. Last season, he was suspended by Illinois while facing those charges, missing 6 games before an injunction allowed him to back on the floor to play. Shannon Jr. set the Illinois single-season scoring record with 736 points. Terrence Shannon Jr., 27th overall to Minnesota. Your grade is what?
I think this is a B+. Was one of the best players in college basketball next year. Going to have to adapt to a different role. He had complete freedom at Illinois this year. Explosive downhill playmaker, big-time athlete, made significant strides with his shooting, and obviously at Minnesota, going to have to learn to play off other people, including Anthony Edwards. The jumper's really going to have to hold up. But when you start to think about who could give them an offensive burst in that second unit, Terrence Shannon is someone, and simply put, we've seen a lot of guys be drafted here that aren't NBA players necessarily next season. Terrence Shannon's an NBA player.
Yeah, he's plug and play. You know, we were just talking about him a few minutes ago as somebody I thought the Knicks should have prioritized maybe in the mid-20s because he's going to help in Minnesota, I think, a good team be better next season. Obviously, he spent much of this season with a cloud hanging over him. He was, as you mentioned, facing a rape charge in Kansas. But he was not only found not guilty of that, he was found not guilty after a trial in which no evidence came out that could be considered negative against him. My point being this, sometimes people are found not guilty, but there are things that come out during the trial and you're like, ugh, I don't know about that. There really was none of that with Terrence Shannon. So when I talked to NBA evaluators about him post-verdict, they said, we're evaluating him as a basketball player and as a person with whatever happened or did not happen in Kansas. It's kind of a moot point at this point. Again, the not guilty verdict was a terrific thing to get wrapped up before the draft, but the fact that the trial was very public and nothing negative really came out, that was also helpful to Terrence Shannon's NBA draft stock.
He's joining a veteran-laden squad in Minnesota. We saw them in the playoffs. We saw Anthony Edwards become a superstar, Mike Conley. You saw, I mean, this team is loaded, right? Karl-Anthony Towns. This is a really good roster that he's joining in Minnesota.
Yeah, and I had this kid twice in the NCAA tournament. He's a professional scorer. This kid knows, Terrence Shannon Jr. knows how to score the basketball at all 3 levels. He has a serious motor, especially in transition. I compare him a little bit to Kelly Oubre when Kelly played at Kansas, both left-handed players. But he's got deeper range than Kelly. But I think he's going to fit in nicely with Minnesota, again with Rob Dillingham. Just think now, they've significantly improved their bench. You have to gain 1 or 2 more victories. You know, a couple of times Minnesota had droughts, especially when Anthony Edwards wasn't in the game. He can keep this team going offensively. I think this is a steal. I'm going to go A- on this thing.
Wow.
I'm going A-.
A-. Hey, Matt, you want to give a grade out here? Terrence Shannon Jr. headed to the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Avery and I are on the same page. I would also go A- here. What's interesting with Terrence Shannon Jr. is, in talking to a few NBA sources over the past 3 or 4 days, the feedback I got was that there was kind of an anticipatory level that he would go in the first round. You didn't necessarily see that reflected in mock drafts, but in NBA circles, it was thought he would actually bump up to in the first round. I'm not surprised to see that here. I think it is a wonderful fit. Terrence Shannon Jr. started his career as a high-level defender. It tailed off in times at Illinois. Be interested to see if he taps back into that now that he's going to the pros, and if he can turn into a player that what I think will actually be the case. I think Terrence Shannon Jr. will be among the 10 to 12 best players from this draft when we look up 5, 6, 7 years from now. And it wouldn't surprise me if he winds up being – he's a different kind of player, don't get me wrong, but you know how Derek Lively in his 1 year, he was a factor on a Mavs team that went deep in the playoffs. Are the Timberwolves on the precipice here of making another deep run, maybe even a finals run, and might Terrence Shannon Jr. be a guy that's contributing 10, 12, 14 actual minutes right there in year 1? He is a player that can contribute immediately. This is good value, and I think some NBA franchises that were hoping and praying that he might be able to stick around and they could sleep on it and hope to steal him in the first 5 picks of day 2. That won't be the case. That's a great value pick for a Timberwolves team that is knocking on the door of making the NBA Finals.